A titanic choice creates an echo that resonates through the digital halls of time for generations to come. We follow the ripples of fate to discover how one person's courage can change the entire world forever. Click subscribe now and listen to the echoes of the great. I watched my son through the diner window, his hands moving in that easy, practiced way he had, refilling coffee, laughing at something an old man at the counter said, wiping down the laminate tabletop without even thinking about it. 22 years old, third year into a nursing program at Ohio State, carrying 17 credit hours this semester. And he still showed up here 4 mornings a week at 5:30 a.m. to work the breakfast shift before class. The November wind was doing something ugly outside. I stood there longer than I meant to, just watching him. His name is Noah. My son. The only good thing I did, right after his mother, Sandra, passed from ovarian cancer when he was 6. 16 years of the two of us in our small house in Columbus, splitting grocery lists, fixing the same leaky faucet 3 times because neither of us really knew what we were doing. He grew up knowing that money was something you earned and spent carefully and didn't pretend you had more of than you did. My phone buzzed. My brother's name on the screen. Still on for Thanksgiving, right? Diane's got everything planned. I typed back, "Noah and I will be there." "What time?" 3 dots. Then, actually about that. "Diane wanted me to talk to you." I stopped walking. She's inviting some of her family. Her sister's husband just made partner at his firm. Her college roommate married into the Kellerman family. You know, the commercial real estate people. Diane wants it to feel a certain way. I stood on the sidewalk in the cold and read that twice. What does that mean, Scott? It just means Noah's great. You know I think the world of him. But Diane's worried things might come up. About what he does. She doesn't want her sister's husband asking questions. I looked back through the diner window. Noah was pouring decaf for the old man now, saying something that made him laugh again, real and loud. He's a nursing student with a 3.8 GPA, I wrote back. He's not embarrassed about where he works. I know all that. It's just Diane's people. They have a certain image of things. If it comes up that he waits tables, they'll make judgments. You know how they are. I didn't know how they were. That was the thing. I'd met Diane's sister twice. I knew her college roommate only from photos on Scott's refrigerator. But I knew Scott. I knew him before Diane. Before the house in Worthington with the circular driveway. Before the membership at the golf club. Before he started saying things like Diane's people. "We'll be there at noon," I wrote, and I put my phone in my pocket. That night I didn't tell Noah about the conversation. He bought a new shirt for the occasion. Not new. He'd found it at the Goodwill on High Street. Dark green button-down. No stain. Good condition. He'd hung it on his closet door 2 days before Thanksgiving, like it was something worth being careful with. "Uncle Scott's place always goes all out," he said while we ate leftovers at the kitchen table. "Remember that charcuterie board last year? Like a foot long." I remember. "You think they'll do that again?" He was genuinely curious. Not performing anything, just curious. That was Noah. He found things worth being interested in everywhere. "Probably," I said. "I got Diane a candle. One of those nice ones from the place on 5th. Used my tip money from Sunday." He speared a piece of broccoli. "You think she'll like it?" Something moved through my chest. "She'll love it," I said. Thanksgiving morning, we drove to Worthington. Scott and Diane had bought the house 4 years ago. 5 bedrooms, 3-car garage, the kind of backyard that made you wonder who was maintaining it, because it certainly wasn't them. We pulled up at 11:30. I planned it early, wanted to help with something, so we weren't just guests who showed up and ate. The driveway was already full. A silver Lexus. An Audi with dealer plates. Something German and black that I couldn't name. I parked my Chevy on the street. Noah grabbed the candle from the back seat, and the pie I'd made, actual pie crust and everything. Took me 2 hours. "We're early," he said. "Good, right?" "Yeah," I said. "Good." We rang the bell. I could hear voices inside, the clink of glasses. Something jazz playing low. Diane opened the door in a cream blouse that I was certain cost more than my car payment. She looked at me and then at Noah, and the smile did something complicated. "Oh, you're early." The way she said it, not surprised, just noting it. The way you'd note that it was raining. We thought we could help with something. Everything's handled. "I have a caterer." Her eyes moved to Noah. Down to the Goodwill shirt. Back up. "Scott's in the den. Why don't you go find him, Ray?" I started to say something. Noah. Her voice softened in a way that wasn't actually soft. Would you mind waiting in the garage? We have some guests with the house gets so warm with everyone in it, and some people have sensitivities to certain smells, from restaurants and things. Noah went very still beside me. I felt it before I saw it. I showered, he said quietly. I came straight from home. Of course you did, honey. It lingers, doesn't it? In fabrics and things. It's not personal. She was already stepping back from the door. The garage is heated. There's a little sitting area Scott set up out there. It'll just be until everyone settles in. Diane, I started. It's fine, Dad. Noah's voice was so measured it scared me. I don't mind. He walked around the side of the house before I could say anything else. I stood there in the doorway watching him go. Diane's expression had already moved on, already composing itself for whoever came next. Scott's in the den, she said again. Second door on the left. I should have followed Noah. I know that. I've gone back to that moment so many times that I could paper a room with all the versions of what I should have done. Instead, I walked into that house full of strangers eating little crostini with things on top, and I went to find my brother. Scott was in the den on a call, laughing in the way he laughed now. Deliberate, shaped, meant to land a certain way. He waved me in, held up a finger. I looked at the shelves while I waited. Photos of Scott and Diane at some vineyard. Diane and her sister at a charity luncheon, both of them in hats. Scott's kids from his first marriage, Dylan and Amber, on a beach somewhere. No photos of Noah. No photos of Sandra. No photos of our parents' old house on Maple, where we grew up eating Tuesday night pot roast and watching the same 4 channels. He hung up. Michael. Good. You look good. Diane put Noah in the garage. Scott's expression shifted. It's just until things get going. She's trying to make a certain impression on Craig. That's Diane's sister's husband. He's a very particular kind of guy. And the Kellermans. Your nephew is a nursing student with a 3.8, I said. He worked this morning. He's been on his feet since 5:30 a.m. I know, he bought Diane a candle with his tip money. Scott rubbed the back of his neck. Look, I hear you. And I love Noah. I do. But these people, they make snap judgments. You know that. If Craig finds out he waits tables, he's already writing him off. Where are your kids? Upstairs. Getting ready. Diane hired a photographer for family portraits before dinner. Family portraits, yeah, He stopped. She likes things to look a certain way in photos. I turned and walked out of the den. Scott called after me. I went through the living room, past the strangers and their careful laughter, through the kitchen where the caterers were doing something elaborate, with a turkey that had probably been brined for 3 days, out the side door to the garage. It was a good garage. Of course it was. 3 cars, a workbench Scott never used, a mini fridge, and a small space heater running in the corner near a folding chair. Noah was sitting in the chair with his coat still on. He was holding a paper plate with 2 crackers on it, the kind from a sleeve, not the caterer's crostini. He'd found them in a cabinet somewhere. Hey, Dad. He tried to smile. He's always tried to smile first. Since he was 6 years old in that funeral parlor, he tried to smile first. I pulled over a step stool and sat down in front of him. Tell me what happened. Nothing happened. I'm waiting like Diane asked. Noah. He looked at the crackers. When I was walking around the side, Diane's sister came out to get something from the Lexus. She saw me. She asked she thought I was from the caterer. I said no, I'm Scott's nephew. And she kind of laughed. Not mean, just. He paused, just like she didn't quite believe it. Like it was a funny thing that a person like me would be related to a person like Scott. I sat with that for a second. How long has this been happening? He shrugged with one shoulder. Since Diane. She's always been fine on the surface. But there's always something. Last Easter she had me sitting at the kids' table, and I'm 22. Christmas 2 years ago, she gave Dylan and Amber these gift cards, nice restaurants, like $100 each. She gave me a $5 Starbucks card. A pause. I don't even drink Starbucks. Each one landed. Why didn't you tell me? Because Uncle Scott is your only family besides me. He finally looked up. And I could tell you liked having him back in your life. You guys were close when you were kids, and I didn't want to be the reason that changed. I thought about Sandra. I thought about the way she used to say that Noah had inherited all the best things from both of us, and somehow none of the worst. She was right. She's usually right, even now. I pulled him into a hug. He's taller than me by 2 inches. He's been taller than me since he was 16 and still hasn't gotten used to it. In that garage, with the space heater running and his Goodwill shirt and his paper plate of crackers, he was 6 again. You listen to me, I said. You are the hardest working person I know. I'm not saying that because I'm your father. I'm saying it because I've watched you. I've seen what you do. I pulled back and looked at him. Your mother would be so proud she wouldn't be able to stand it, and I am not leaving you in this garage. He started to say something. We're going inside, I said, and we're going to sit at that table, and we are not going to apologize for one single thing about who we are. We waited until people started moving toward the dining room. Then we walked in through the side door, past the caterers, straight into the living room. I didn't ask permission. I walked like I'd been invited, which I had. The photographer was packing up near the Christmas tree. Diane had it decorated already, before Thanksgiving even. White lights and gold ornaments. Very deliberate, very curated. About 30 people in the room, all of them dressed like the holiday was something you could fail at. They looked at us, at my sport coat from JCPenney, and Noah's Goodwill shirt. I felt the assessments happening. I felt them before. It didn't slow me down. Diane appeared. She positioned herself between us and the rest of the room like a crossing guard. We're moving into dinner now. Let me find you seats. There's a spot near the kitchen that... We'll find seats, I said. Ray, the table's arranged. Then, we'll rearrange it. In the dining room, the place cards were set. Calligraphy. Creamed cardstock. Very Diane. I found mine. Back corner, next to the kitchen door. I found Noah's. Same end. Last chair. Positioned so the serving staff would have to step around him every 30 seconds. I picked up both cards, moved us to 2 open seats in the middle of the table. Good seats. Eye level with everyone. Those are for the Kellermans. Diane was behind me. Then put them at the end. Ray. The seating was planned around conversation flow. Then have a different conversation. She took the cards from my hand hard enough that I felt it. But she didn't put us back. Dinner started. There was a lot of food. More than 30 people could reasonably eat, I think, to make a point about abundance. The conversations around me were about neighborhoods I didn't live in, schools I hadn't sent my kid to, investment strategies I'd never needed. I listened with part of my attention and watched Noah with the rest. He was eating quietly, carefully, being small in the way he'd learned to be when he was in a room that didn't want him. Then Craig, Diane's sister's husband, the new partner at whatever firm, leaned across the table toward his wife and said it loud enough that the people nearby went quiet. So what do you do, Noah? You in school? Nursing program at Ohio State, Noah said. 3rd year. Nursing. Craig said it the way you'd say, oh, that's interesting when you don't find it interesting. That's a lot of work for the pay, isn't it? I think it's worth it. And you work somewhere in the meantime? I wait tables. Breakfast shift mostly. Helps with tuition. Craig nodded slowly. Then he looked at his wife. And she smiled that particular smile, the one that means, see, I told you. And Diane's college roommate, the one married into the Kellerman family, said it like she thought she was being kind. Well, at least you're not just sitting around. Some kids your age, you know, no work ethic at all. She said it like he should be grateful for the compliment. Noah said thank you in a voice I recognized. The voice he uses when he's decided to be better than the situation. I opened my mouth. And Scott, to my genuine surprise, got there first. He was 3 seats down, and he'd been quiet for most of dinner. Noah's going to make a better nurse than any doctor I've ever met, he said. He's been doing this since he was 19. 4 a.m. shifts, full course load. He's the one my kids should be learning from. The table went a little quiet. Diane touched Scott's arm. Honey, I'm just stating a fact, Diane. But his voice had something uncertain in it. Something that was trying to hold ground it wasn't sure it had. Diane looked at him and then at me, and then she said, quietly, deliberately, it's admirable, of course. But there are certain paths that make certain conversations easier. We all understand that. It's just reality. The table went back to eating, the way tables do when they've decided something uncomfortable has been resolved. I stood up. Chair on hardwood. Loud. 30 heads turned. Certain paths, I said. I wasn't yelling. Yelling was beside the point. Diane set down her fork. My son got up at 5:30 this morning. He served 37 breakfasts before his shift ended. He came here straight after, showered and changed, and brought you a candle he bought with his tip money. He's carrying 17 credit hours and a 3.8 GPA. In 2 years, he's going to be the person in the room when someone's family member codes at 3 in the morning, and he's going to do that job better than anyone you've ever hired, promoted, or written a check to. The Kellerman wife had stopped chewing. You put him in the garage, I said, because you were embarrassed by how he earns his money. You want to talk about certain paths. Here's a path. Your kids have never worked a day in their lives. Dylan's 24, and he's been living off Scott's account since he dropped out of his second college. Amber doesn't know what an early morning feels like because she's never had to. That's the path you've built for them, and I hope it works out. I looked at Diane directly. But don't you ever, in any room I'm in, treat my son like a detail to be managed around your dinner party. The room was quiet in that specific way where everyone has decided to be very interested in their plate. I walked around the table to Noah, stood behind him, put my hands on his shoulders. He is going to be extraordinary, I said. He already is, and the fact that he waited tables to get there is not a footnote. It's the whole story. Diane stood. Her voice was perfectly controlled. I'd like you to leave. Gladly. I looked at Scott. My brother. The man who taught me to ride a bike on the cracked sidewalk in front of our parents' house, who took the overnight bus to Columbus when Sandra died because he couldn't afford a plane ticket and didn't want me to be alone. You've got a choice right now, I said to him. Same as you had this morning when you called me about this. Same as you've had every time Diane pulled one of these stunts with Noah. You can stand up, or you can stay seated. Scott looked at Diane, looked at me, looked at his hands. He stayed seated. I'm sorry, Ray, he said. This isn't the place. Something I'd been carrying for a long time quietly put itself down. Okay, I said. That tells me everything. We walked out. Through the living room, past the gold ornaments and the white lights and the very curated holiday. In the entryway, near the door, Diane's voice came from behind us. Take those gifts with you. We don't need that. I stopped. There was a table by the door with the gifts people had brought. Wine bottles, wrap things, a flower arrangement. And sitting in the middle of it, still in its bag from the shop on 5th, was Noah's candle, the one he'd bought with his tip money. I picked it up. I held it for a second. Then I put it very carefully back in the bag, held it out to Noah, and we walked out into the cold November afternoon. Neither of us said anything for the first few minutes in the car. Noah was looking out the passenger window at the houses going by, the ones with the inflatable turkeys in the yard, and the modest little pilgrim flags on the front porches. Then he said, You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. Uncle Scott. Uncle Scott made his choice. Noah was quiet for another block. I'm sorry about him. Don't be sorry. That's not yours to be sorry about. We went home and ordered Chinese food and watched whatever football game happened to be on, and at some point Noah fell asleep on the couch with a container of lo mein still in his hands, and I sat there in the quiet of our house and thought about Sandra, about all the things she would have said, about the fact that she would have been furious and graceful about it at the same time, which was a thing she could do that I never figured out how to learn. The next morning, Scott called. I let it go to voicemail. He called again that afternoon. I listened to the message. He said he was sorry. He said he'd been thinking about it. He said a lot of things that were probably true. I didn't call back that day or the next. 4 days later, I got a letter. Actual letter, envelope, and stamp, from Diane's lawyer. It cited a candle holder on the entryway table that had apparently been knocked over when we left. Said the piece was valued at $800, outlined payment options. I'd forwarded it to my own lawyer, a guy I'd gone to high school with, who did mostly estate work but knew enough to write a letter. He wrote back on letterhead explaining that if Diane chose to pursue this, we would be prepared to discuss the pattern of treatment Noah had experienced over the course of 4 years, documented, dated, witnessed, and that this conversation could happen privately or publicly, and that we would leave the choice to her. I never heard about the candle holder again. Scott and I didn't speak for almost 3 months. Winter came and went. Noah finished his semester. 3.9, highest he'd ever gotten. In January, he was selected for a clinical rotation at the Children's Hospital downtown, the one everyone tries for, and most people don't get. I found out from his program coordinator, because Noah didn't want to make a big deal of it. We went to dinner at the diner where he worked, booth in the corner, same booth we always took. His co-workers kept stopping by to congratulate him. The short-order cook came out from the kitchen in his apron to shake Noah's hand. It was the best dinner I'd had in years. We were eating club sandwiches. In February, Scott called on a Sunday. I picked up this time. He said Diane had moved out. He said he'd known for a while that things weren't right. That she'd been pulling away for longer than he wanted to admit. That looking back, he could trace the shape of it but hadn't wanted to see it while he was inside it. He didn't tell me why she left. I didn't ask. "I've been thinking about Thanksgiving," he said. "Have you?" I sat there. He said it like he was still surprised by it. "You gave me a chance right in front of everybody, and I sat there." "You did." It's the thing I keep coming back to. Not the embarrassment. Not Diane. Just, I sat there while you walked out was my nephew and I sat there. I didn't say anything. "I'd like to talk to Noah," he said, "if he's willing. That's up to him." Noah took the call. I don't know everything that was said because I gave him the privacy to have that conversation in his room with the door closed. What I know is that it lasted 45 minutes, and when Noah came out, he said, "He sounds like he means it. I'm going to give him a chance to prove it." That's Noah. That's Sandra's son. Scott started small. He came to Noah's clinical presentation in March, showed up without being asked, sat in the back, stayed for the whole thing. He texted me after. "He's remarkable." "You know that?" "I know that," I wrote back. In April, the three of us had dinner. Not anything fancy. A bar and grill near campus, the kind with TVs on every wall. Scott asked Noah real questions, about the rotation, about what he wanted to specialize in, about what it was actually like on the floor at the children's hospital. He listened to the answers. He didn't perform listening. He actually did it. At one point, Scott said, "I owe you an apology that I don't know how to make big enough." Noah looked at him for a second. Then he said, "Start smaller. Just keep showing up." Scott laughed. It was the old laugh. The one from the sidewalk in front of our parents' house. Things moved slowly after that, the way they should. Scott's divorce was finalized in May. He sold the Worthington house because he said he'd never liked it anyway. Which I believed. He moved into an apartment in German Village, smaller, older building, more like the places we'd grown up around. He said it felt more like somewhere you actually lived. He started showing up for Noah's stuff. Not every time. Noah didn't want that too much too soon, but consistently enough that it started to mean something. Dylan and Amber were navigating the divorce in their own ways. Difficult and slow, and Scott was honest with me that he didn't know how much damage had been done there, and was trying to find out. Noah finished his third year and started his fourth. The children's hospital rotation led to a part-time position on the pediatric floor on weekends. He gave notice at the diner, tearful, apparently, on both sides. The old man at the counter showed up with a card signed by 8 regulars, and he traded breakfast shifts for something that was the actual beginning of what he was building. One evening in July, the three of us were sitting on my back porch. The yard isn't much. Patch of grass, old grill, the tree Sandra planted when we moved in. That's now taller than the house. Noah had brought beer. He was 22 and legal, and still a little sheepish about drinking in front of me, which I found very funny. "I've been thinking," he said, looking out at the yard. "Always dangerous," I said. He grinned, "that when I finish, when I'm done with school, and I've got the license and I'm doing the work, I want to specialize in pediatric oncology." I looked at him. "I know it's hard," he said. "I know it's heavy, but those kids..." When I was in the rotation, there were these families, and they were so scared, and the nurses who were good, the really good ones, they were the difference between a family feeling alone and a family feeling like someone was actually with them. He took a drink. I want to be one of those. I thought about Sandra, about the nurses who were good and the ones who weren't, about what a difference it made. "Your mom," I said, "would have moved heaven and earth to have had a nurse like you." He nodded, looked at the tree. "I know." Scott cleared his throat. He'd been quiet for a while, which wasn't like the old Scott, and was very like the new one. "I set up an account," he said. "Education account. For when you get your license and need to sit for boards and all the credentialing stuff. It's not a lot, but it's yours. No conditions." Noah looked at him for a second. "You don't have to." "I know I don't have to." Scott's voice was steady. "That's why I want to." We sat on that porch until it got dark and the firefly started up. And at some point, Scott told a story about our parents I hadn't heard in 20 years. About our father getting lost on a camping trip and refusing to admit it. And we laughed until Noah was bent over in his chair. That Thanksgiving came around again. We didn't go to Worthington. We didn't get an invitation, which was fine. We went to our neighbor Carla's house. She'd been cooking for half the street since her husband passed, and she made a turkey that made you believe in things again. Scott came with us. He brought a pie, canned filling from a box, barely passable, which we told him directly and which he accepted with dignity. He fit somehow. It wasn't forced. He just fit. I think about that morning every now and then, standing outside the garage, watching Noah walk around the side of the house in his Goodwill shirt with his coat already on against the cold. The moment I walked into that house instead of following him, I made peace with it in the way you make peace with things you can't undo. Not forgetting, just placing it somewhere you can see it. So you remember. Stand up sooner. That's what it tells me. Don't calculate the cost of doing the right thing in front of people who make you feel like the cost is worth calculating. When your son walks around the side of a house because someone decided he smells wrong, you walk around that side too. You don't go looking for your brother. Noah graduated the following spring. Top 10% of his class. The program director said his name at the ceremony and said the word exceptional before it, unprompted, which was the kind of thing that made me wish I could press a button and put it directly into Sandra's hands. He's working at the Children's Hospital full-time now, pediatric floor, rotating into the oncology unit. He still wakes up early. Still gets there before he has to. Still says good morning to the custodial staff and knows their names and asks about their kids. Because that's who he is. That's who his mother made him, and that's who I tried my best not to mess up. Scott came to the graduation, sat next to me in the auditorium. When Noah's name was called, Scott clapped louder than I did, which I noticed and didn't say anything about. Afterward, outside in the May sunlight, Noah hugged him. Short but real. Some things take time. Some things take a champagne tower. Or in our case, just a long winter and a person deciding to be different. Either way, what matters is who's standing there in the spring. I know who is standing there. I know whose son he is. And I will never again let anyone put him somewhere he doesn't belong. I've thought a lot about what Diane actually believed she was doing that morning. I don't think she saw herself as cruel. I think she saw herself as practical. She had a room to manage, impressions to make, a version of her life to protect. Noah was a variable that didn't fit the version, so she put him somewhere out of sight, the way you'd move something off a counter before company comes over. That's the part that stayed with me longest. Not the malice, but the casualness of it. He wasn't worth anger. He was worth a folding chair and a sleeve of crackers. That's what indifference does to a person. Not the dramatic cruelty, but the quiet administrative kind. The kind that doesn't even register itself as wrong, because it never got angry enough to feel anything at all. And what I've come to understand, sitting with this for a year and a half now, is that the choices we make in those small moments, whether we stand up or stay seated, whether we follow our kid around the side of the house or walk in through the front door, those choices compound. They add up. They become the record of who we were when it cost us something. I walked into that house instead of following Noah. I'll carry that. Not as punishment, just as fact. The fact is what keeps me honest. But I also stood up at that table, and I said what I said because it was true and because Noah had been swallowing it for 4 years while I wasn't paying enough attention to notice. That's the thing about raising a kid who doesn't want to be a burden. They'll absorb a remarkable amount of damage before they let you see it. Noah was protecting me. A 22-year-old kid was protecting his father from the knowledge that his brother's wife thought he smelled like a restaurant and wasn't worth a real chair. The work ethic that Diane found embarrassing. The 5:30 a.m. shifts, the breakfast regulars, the tip money carefully spent on a candle for someone who didn't deserve it. That work ethic is exactly what's going to make Noah extraordinary at the hardest job I can imagine. You don't learn to sit with a scared family at 3 in the morning by having everything handed to you. You learn it by knowing what it feels like to be the person in the room that everyone else has decided doesn't quite belong. Scott learned something too. It just took him longer, and it cost him more, and I think he'd be the first to tell you the delay wasn't worth it. He sat in that chair and watched us walk out and then spent 3 months living with what that felt like. The choices we avoid don't disappear. They wait. What I keep coming back to is this. Intelligence without integrity is just strategy. Resilience without honesty is just endurance. The thing that makes a person actually good, not impressive, not successful, but good, is whether they can hold both at once. Whether they can work hard and stay kind. Whether they can be treated poorly and not become someone who treats others poorly. Noah has that. He was born with some of it and earned the rest pulling espresso shots at 5:30 in the morning for people who probably never asked his name. I didn't teach him that. Sandra did, and then life confirmed it. I just tried not to get in the way. And on the days I failed at that, I tried to make it right before it was too late. Most of the time, you get a chance to make it right. The question is whether you take it.